Greetings, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Last Harvest podcast with Damien Dumar, myself. In this podcast, we talk about the book The Last Harvest by Lucien Mars, available on Amazon. And we discuss current events that illustrate how the theme of The Last Harvest begins to unfold, especially as 2025 begins to roll around. What is The Last Harvest by Lucien Mars about? Well, on the cover of the book are the Georgia Guidestones, which clearly let everybody know that it is the goal of the global elite to reduce the population by 90% and hybridize and enslave the rest. And they plan to initiate this plan in 2025, which is right around the corner. Now, when I say by 2025, they will initiate the plan, I don't mean that 90% of the world population will be killed off in 2025. What I mean is that the plans, which ultimately culminate in a reduction of 90% of the population and hybridization and enslavement of the rest, begin to commence in 2025. It will take a while, but it will happen. And the number of 500 million, or a 90% reduction in population, as well as the year 2025, keep coming up over and over again, not only in The Last Harvest by Lucien Mars, but in current events as they unfold. We have the Soul Catcher 2025 project, which is putting a chip in your head, very similar to Elon Musk's placement of a chip inside the head. We have the Heritage Foundation Project 2025. These are all instances of 2025 that are not mentioned in the book. However, we can see that information that unfolds on a day-to-day basis reinforces everything that's in The Last Harvest by Lucien Mars. So, what has been going on lately? Let's find out. Well, first of all, there was a film that just got released a few days ago called Upgrade, and it's streaming on Netflix and apparently available for rental and purchase on Prime Video and Amazon. I watched it on Netflix last night, and it is an interesting film, relatively well-made action film, science fiction, science fact film about an individual who is a quadriplegic who receives a brain implant by a Silicon Valley tech entrepreneur by the name of Elon. I don't remember the last name. So again, they wanted to call him Elon, but they called him Iran instead, so people would figure it out. And the individual they cast to play this tech entrepreneur looks like Elon Musk. Wow, what a surprise. So to make a long story short, and spoilers for those of you who plan to watch it, you might want to skip the next 2 minutes of me talking, but it deals with the reality that once a microchip is implanted inside the brain, then the human loses all control, and the chip and the AI that's behind the chip have complete control over the human being. So at first, when I was watching the film and you see him get all these superpowers, he's not only no longer quadriplegic, but he's doing all these superhuman things, hence the title Upgrade. At first I was thinking, oh, is this a film promoting the implantation of chips into one's head? But as the film goes on, the film makes it very clear that this is an example of how one loses one's soul, how one loses complete autonomy of their body. And it's the film ends very tragically for this individual, because this AI chip that's implanted in him decides that the human mind is too weak and compartmentalizes it into an artificial reality, and then proceeds to take full control over the body and go out and spread AI. So the film covers the dangers of AI as well as the dangers of getting a chip implanted inside of you. So I think it's worth watching. I have not heard or looked for any kind of interviews with the writers or creators of it, so I don't know what their motivation in making the film was, but I think it's very interesting and very appropriate. What's also amazing to me is that films can't be made overnight. So somehow this film as a concept came into Genesis at least a few years ago. I don't know how fast they can make the film. It must take at least 2 years to bring this from conception to fruition. So it's interesting. It's certainly worth watching. Now we get to some darker stuff here. So I saw this on a discussion board, and it said on it, just in, Trump proposes building 10 new U.S. freedom cities, offering baby bonuses. Whenever you see the word freedom, like freedom cities, you have to be nervous. But what is so interesting about this is that they are offering baby bonuses. So I looked into this article further, and there are many news sources. I've picked the one on CNN, and here again we have Trump proposes building 10 freedom cities. And as you scroll down to the details, they do talk about there will be an enhanced child tax credit, although Trump did not explain what baby bonuses would amount to or who would qualify, but he did said that he will be providing families with baby bonuses and that this would, quote, help launch a new baby boom, end quote. This is very interesting because, as I've mentioned before in this podcast, and as Lucien Mars has mentioned before on some of his articles in the notes from the night side section on vampireashram.com, some people would look at the book The Last Harvest and say, well, if the elite plan to reduce the population by 90%, why would they be encouraging a new baby boom? Recently, we have a situation where Roe versus Wade was reversed. There's a push to make babies. Elon Musk is saying, oh, I'm not in favor of depopulation. Look how many children I have, and we need to make more and more children. And a lot of people online who have a, how should I say, a more of a racially conscious or racist, who knows how you want to phrase it, view on things will say, well, white people are going extinct and there's the great replacement. This is what Elon Musk talks about all the time as well. And so the solution is that whites need to have as many babies as possible. There needs to be another baby boom. And even Andrew Tate here, in a recent, I guess, what they call war room meeting, we have Andrew here on the left and his brother Tristan on the right, the infamous Tate brothers, and they have a 3-hour, actually it's a 4-hour and 19-minute and 10-second emergency meeting where they talk about how important it is for white people to be having as many babies as possible and how important it is in general for everyone to have as many babies as possible in order to propagate the future of their nation and their race. It's the same old thing we've heard over and over again, and Tristan Tate says something very interesting. He makes a reference to the Georgia Guidestones that are on the cover of The Last Harvest. Let's hear it. It's very brief.
Trying to encourage you with tough love.
They put down in writing that they want the world's population to be less than 500 million people.
You hear that? He said they put down in writing that they want the world's population to be less than 500 million people. And then the rest of the podcast is basically have as many babies as possible, have as many babies as possible. Well, I've always been a little bit suspicious of Andrew Tate because he has a tattoo here on his body, which he's modified over the years. In some respects, it appears to obscure what it is. But he has a multicolored rainbow-like serpent that wraps around his body. It wraps up his arm, it wraps up his back, down his chest, and it ends on his chest. And it's a serpentine tattoo. And some people would say, oh, that's no big deal. He's known as Cobra Tate. That was his name when he was fighting as a kickboxer. I forget what they call that when they give you some sort of moniker such as that. But he was known as Cobra Tate, so he will say that's what that means. But if you look over the years, you see the tattoo is modified a bit. And I'm always a bit suspicious of it because when I see a tattoo like that, we have a rainbowed serpent. We have it wrapping around his arm like that. Makes you wonder who's really influencing him. Good question. So, another comment that Tristan makes, because Tristan is actually the smarter of the two, is that, and the mastermind, so to speak, is that Tristan says that world leaders in the past, they always understand the importance of pushing the creation of babies. And he talks about the ruler of Hungary right now, his last name is Orban, and how he is pushing to make more children. And he talks about how so many leaders have pushed the idea of having lots of children. So the question comes up, is there a conflict between the assertion of The Last Harvest by Lucien Mars, and it's the assertion of all the elites? Because if you read The Last Harvest by Lucien Mars, it's not his words. Every part of the book that deals with this impending genocide is actually the words of your leaders. So how can it be that your leaders on one hand would say, reduce the population by 90%, on the other hand, make as many babies as possible? Well, the answer is the plan of the leaders, as laid out in The Last Harvest, is to eliminate 90% of the population and hybridize and enslave the rest, because the elites are under the influence of the Nebu Gray extraterrestrials who wish to take this planet for themselves. So now, who do you think that they will hybridize and enslave? Do they think it's going to be you when you're contaminated with radiation? No. They plan to hybridize and enslave the babies that you're going to make. It's that simple. As I've said before, as Lucien Mars says on Vampire Ashram and Notes from the Night Side, the first time that there was a great destruction on the planet, it was by water. So you needed an ark. The next great destruction will be by fire, whether it be by nuclear holocaust, solar flare, the volcano under Yosemite or Yellowstone National Park erupting. It's going to be by fire. So the new ark is underground. And I would not be shocked if underneath these 10 proposed freedom cities, they were building 10 deep underground military bases or DUMBs, because it's a great place to take the kids in. You see, you don't have to worry about immigrants not reproducing, because as the Tate brothers and Elon Musk and all the other great replacement theory advocates point out, these other non-white groups are all having as many kids as possible. It's just the whites now who need to catch up and make babies too, because the elite want as many babies as possible. And that's where these upgrades will be going. That's where Elon Musk's chips will be going. That's why he's advocating on one hand for making as many babies as possible, on the other hand advocating to put chips into people's brains. Because he knows where the chips will ultimately end up, because he works for Satan. He announces it. He wears it on his outfit, on his Instagram photos in the past, or Twitter picture, whatever it was. You can go Google it. It's all over the place. And this is the plan. So have as many babies as you can, because you're only helping out the global elite, because that's where the chips will be going. So even here, I get a little suspicious when the Tate brothers come out and take a 4-hour emergency meeting and talk about how you have to start having as many kids as possible. Are they in on it? Andrew always says that he is a proponent for fighting the Matrix. Well, first of all, the reality is humans cannot fight against the Matrix. It's not possible, but that's another podcast. So he says that fighting the Matrix is making as many babies as possible. No, it's not. You're actually feeding it. Again, look at Andrew Tate's tattoo. And why is he sitting there with his shirt off in a podcast for 4 hours while his brother is fully clothed as usual? Is it to show that tattoo? I don't know, but it makes you think. It really makes you think about it. So the whole idea is, well, why is the book titled The Last Harvest? Why did Lucien Mars title that? It's because the last harvest is you. You are basically crops And now there's a push for the final crop, which is going to be your babies. Trump is the Antichrist. He's possessed by Satan, works for Satan, and Satan is aligned with the Greys who are in control of this planet. Can you see the plan start to unfold? I hope so. And humans, for the most part, they've always been sacrifices in some way or shape or form. Here we have an article from AP, the Associated Press. Ukraine's divisive mobilization law comes into force as a new Russian push strains frontline troops. Well, has anyone ever realized that by now it's getting to the point where every fighting age man in the Ukraine will be dead? And that's fine because, again, it's part of the last harvest. They have no problem killing them all. There's a reason when Tristan Tate said that these leaders in the past, they want to always push for an increase in population. Is it a surprise that right after the population push, they go to war? So what are they doing? What are they making the babies for? To sacrifice them on the battlefield? Exactly. How much more obvious can it be? But humans don't seem to get it. They're not very bright. Here's another article from the New Voice of Ukraine. Who knows what that is? But they say 18 new Ukrainian-made weapons get green light from Defense Ministry. Now, when you see a headline like that, you have to think to yourself, when did they have time to develop 18 new Ukrainian-made weapons? Aren't they begging for weapons and support from the West? So you're trying to tell me that the Ukraine has a massive enough armament production industry to have come up with 18 new weapons since the war started? When did they build these factories? Very interesting. Let's scroll down here a bit. The Defense Ministry noted that 24 newly codified weapons were put into operation over the past week. They've greenlit more than 80 samples of Ukrainian-made weapons. Ukraine needs to boost its own production capabilities and increase weapons manufacturing due to delays in assistance. Yes, but here's the interesting thing. On April 13th, Zelensky stated there are 500 defense industry production facilities in Ukraine. Where did they come from? Wake up. This is all planned. Can you imagine creating 500 weapons production plants? Most of your cities are in rubble. Most of your men are dead or on their way to being killed off. Yet you have 500 weapons production facilities. Who's working in them? I'm sure people are. But the point is, the narrative is that Ukraine is this helpless country that got invaded and needs help from the West to defend democracy and freedom. Please send us money and weapons. But you have 500 weapons production facilities in your own country. This is all planned out. All planned out by the elites who are in control of the military-industrial complex under the influence of the Greys. Here we have a Russian TV host basically claiming that they're going to take over the Ukraine, not only the Ukraine, but Poland, Finland. They're saying those countries and capitals will also be theirs. Just like they recently threatened that Paris and other places like this would be theirs. So for those of you who think they're grandstanding, here's another article from the Associated Press. Poland invests $2.5 billion into fortifying border with Russia and Belarus. So Poland, again, they're taking it very seriously. When the Russians say on their television that they're going to take Poland, Poland believes it. They act accordingly. $2.5 billion. Here's another interesting article. Russia just discovered the world's largest oil reserve. Guess where it is? Antarctica. Those of you who follow my podcast know that Iran was recently threatening to go into Antarctica in violation of the Antarctic Treaty. Well, now it appears that the Russians wish to do the same thing. These things don't work. I want to advance through these slides, but it doesn't let me. Too much stuff on the screen. The potential amount of crude oil and gas found by Russia would be around 511 million barrels of oil, according to the Telegraph. Well, once again, we can see World War III beginning to start. Again, Iran and Russia wish to violate the Antarctic Treaty. Iran wants to wipe Israel off the map. Russia wants to take all of Europe. We haven't heard from China yet, but we know they want to grab Taiwan. And from there, what will they grab next? It's not looking good. Here's an article from USA Today. It's called, "What Happens If Trump Gets Convicted Ahead of November Election?" And the answer is nothing. Because they say that most legal experts agree that anyone could become president of the United States despite being found guilty of a crime, as the U.S. Constitution only defines the requirements to run for the highest office in the land. So Doug Spencer, an election law professor at the University of Colorado, predicts that Trump being convicted in any one of his criminal cases would have little impact on his ability to run for president. So you can see already how they're setting it up for the Supreme Court to make sure that Trump gets elected as president. Because if the U.S. Constitution only defines the requirements to run for the highest office in the land, and most legal experts, whoever they are, agree, at least for this article, why is this article being put out here? This article is being promoted and pushed out because it's setting the stage for the future. Because if it's a constitutional issue, it's going to end up in front of the Supreme Court, and they will elect him as president because he's already stacked the court in his favor. Currently, the U.S. Constitution sets out a list of qualifications for becoming president. The person must be 35 years old, a natural-born citizen, and a resident of the United States for at least 14 years. So what's interesting is that if you're convicted of a crime on a federal level, you can no longer vote, in my understanding. But apparently you can still run for president if you're Trump and possessed by Satan, and if the Supreme Court is on your side. And what Spencer says, for those who have an issue with the fact that his conviction would have little impact, he says, quote, "If he's found guilty, voters in the country should take that into account when they make their vote. Do you want a felon running your country?" End quote. Well, according to polls, they do want a felon running the country. So, again, we're looking at a strong possibility that no matter what happens, Trump is still going to be able to run for president. And if he runs for president, he'll probably be elected. This here is a bit of an older article where one of Trump's attorneys warns of relentless retaliation if Donald Trump gets elected to second term. Well, that's obvious. Some prognosticators and soothsayers, for those who put stock in such things, have said that Trump will be the last president. And even Trump himself has said that this will be the last election. So Alina Habba says, quote, "That is what they do. They hide what they've done by going after Trump. Well, we've got 1 year, and then we're going to be looking at them deep and hard." Well, that was awkward. Finally, here we have billionaire investor Ray Dalio warns U.S. is on the brink, and there's more than a 1 in 3 chance of a civil war. Now, the thing about billionaire investors is that they're usually right, because when you have that much money, you also have that much power, because let's face it, the political system in this country is up for sale like in most others. How many billionaire investors are behind the Project 2025 from the Heritage Foundation? So he says, quote, "We are now on the brink," end quote. He told the Financial Times in an interview published on Thursday, estimating the probability of strife erupting at somewhere between 35 to 40%. Civil war seemed inconceivable only a few years ago, but the January 6 scenes of angry mobs sacking the Capitol, beamed into living rooms and narrated by a British ITV news team in real time, were all too reminiscent of political revolts in third world countries. That's correct. And we are currently in May of 2024, November 2024. It's going to be a big deal. What's going to happen? We don't know exactly. But even this billionaire says it's a 35 to 40% chance there will be a civil war. We already have articles foreshadowing that even if Trump's convicted, he can still get elected. Another possible scenario is that maybe Biden wins. Trump claims the election was stolen. We could have some Russian operatives pose as terrorists and pull a stunt in a couple of the polling places and throw the whole election into dispute. It gets handed over to the Supreme Court, which was stacked already in Trump's favor by Trump himself. The Constitution says that, well, it says nothing about if someone is convicted of a crime and the impact on their ability to run for president. The Supreme Court could very easily say, no big deal, and hand him the presidency. It's all very possible. And this would also trigger a civil war. We have World War III starting to unfold very quickly, although a lot of people do not want to accept it. But then most people don't want to accept that it is the goal of the elites to eliminate 90% of you and hybridize and enslave your future children. In order to do effective hybridizations and enslavement, you ideally need children. You need to do it from the womb, when they're babies still. That's what you need. I know it sounds far-fetched. Some people say, that's crazy. It sounds like something out of the film The Matrix. Well, it is. And if you read The Last Harvest by Lucien Mars, you can learn all about what the Matrix actually is. A lot of these comments you hear from people also like Elon Musk, who knows something because he's in alignment with Satan, much like Donald Trump is. Some people say that this reality is not exactly real. It is a type of computer simulation. There's something to that. Some people would say that, well, the movie The Matrix, that trilogy starring Keanu Reeves, human beings are just an energy source, a battery for another form of existence. Well, there's something to that as well. If you want to know what it's really about, get The Last Harvest by Lucian Mars. David Icke talks about the Matrix as well. He has a certain amount of it right. You want the full story? Get The Last Harvest by Lucian Mars. We have it in audiobook format with the best narrator there is. We have it in ebook format, so you can read it on your Kindle device. We have it in physical, hard copy book. Very high quality, nice. Why have you not gotten a copy yet? I know people these days don't like to read. They have low attention spans. But reading is fun. Reading is fundamental, they used to say back in the day. And you don't have to have a low attention span. And you won't have a low attention span when you read this interesting book and see information that you've never heard anywhere else before. Because while the second half of the book may be the words of your leaders, and perhaps you have heard them before in bits and pieces, perhaps you've read some of the latter half of the book on conspiracy sites, because people have been talking about FEMA camps already since the year 2000. And for those of you who don't believe there are FEMA camps, there are. There are enough FEMA camps in North America to hold 20 million of you. And if you don't believe me, go on Amazon and you can get a book written by the Department of Defense that describes exactly how they're going to operate these camps in great detail. They're not hiding it anymore. 2025 is right around the corner. They know you're all too distracted with TikTok and all the entertainment online. They know you're not going to do a thing. They don't mind anymore. They can let the information out, but what they still want you to do is make as many babies as possible. Because where are they going to implant all those chips they're going to be manufacturing? So what are you waiting for? Make future slaves. Come on. It's up to you. But I tell you, nobody should put a chip inside their head. The moment you do that, you become a slave. Eternally, you're damned. Your soul is done. And you won't be able to die because that chip will be in control of you. And if you're drafted to go to war, don't do it. Why not be like the Amish and be pacifists? Why would you go to war? Fighting for what? For things your leaders are telling you to do? Go off there and get drones dropped on you, blown apart? I mean, you have the free will to do that. But in the end, what were all the wars worth? Just sacrifices. That's all it was. I mean, what was the purpose of Afghanistan? Nobody knows. What was the purpose of Iraq? I don't know. What was the purpose of Vietnam? What was the purpose of the Korean War? Were any of these countries a threat to the United States or the safety of the citizens in the United States? No. So what was everyone going there for? You lose your soul for what? You're not meant to fight. It says, thou shalt not kill, but I'm not here to preach or lecture. Just putting it out there. Just putting it out there. So again, I would recommend get a copy of The Last Harvest by Lucian Mars and learn all about what's coming, and then start praying, free from the confines of any religious structure. You don't need any religion. You don't have to be a Christian. Jesus is not going to save you. He never saved anybody. You can only save yourself through your free will actions. Establish a relationship with the perfect Creator, the Divine Father yourself. You don't need a religion. We're not trying to start a religion. We're not trying to save anybody. We're just getting the information out there. You're all on death row. What are you going to do? Start praying. It's too late for you to do anything about it. Believe you can fight the Matrix, like Andrew Tate says, by getting rich and jacked and making tons of babies? This is a joke. All you're doing is feeding the Matrix, making a final crop that can be implanted while the rest of you get and enslaved while the rest of you get harvested. And Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate sit there on their podcast and brag about how many kids they've made. They're all going to be either killed or enslaved. But knock yourself out. Perhaps the Tate brothers should read The Last Harvest. They email me. I'll send them free copies of the audio and the ebook. Because if they really want to be opponents of the Matrix. Well, like I said, there's not much you can actually do to fight the Matrix, but you can put out the information so people know what's happening. You can encourage people to pray. Again, it's not about Christianity or Islam or Judaism. It's just about establishing a relationship with your Creator. So on that note, we'll see you next week. Signing off for today, Damien Dumar.